brings him a lot of joy and teaches him a lot about patience too. The first tree we'll be looking at today is a jade plant. It's a jade bonsai. This is a subtropical, hardy little plant, and as my dad told me, it's probably the most common bonsai for beginners. It's difficult to damage it. It's really hardy. This one here has developed a very thick canopy, and it has thick, round leaves. This is a beginner plant, and as such, it has a pretty straight trunk, which is not what you desire for more advanced bonsais. You want the trunk to move or to have some shape. And this one was my mom's, or his wife's, starter jade. Then we have a Fukian tea tree. This can be another good starter plant. It's also subtropical and has moderate sized leaves. In a little bit we'll see some with smaller leaves. When I filmed this, it was the dormant period for both the Fukian and the jade. So during the growing season, from the end of February to the end of September, the Fukian has lots of little white flowers and red berries, which aren't here now, but are one of my dad's favorite parts of this plant. Again, it's a beginner tree and pretty simple. He also wanted to make a little side note about these baskets. These are fertilizer baskets. There's two types, black plastic and metal. And they hold little granules of osmocote, which is a common fertilizer. So you put them in the baskets, and then as you water the plant, the water takes the fertilizer down, which is how it reaches the soil and the root ball. Here we have a converted rose. So it's a rose plant converted into a bonsai. It was a desert rose plant that my dad's wife, my mom, saw at a flower show, and they wanted to see, well, my dad asked his teacher if it could be converted into a bonsai, and that's what they did. They severely chopped back the canopy and the branches, took it out of its big pot, reduced the size of the root ball, and put that into a smaller container, and that will control its size. He likes it because it has a very complex, interesting trunk. You can see some aerial roots starting, right there. And during the growing season, it has beautiful pink flowers from March to September. So it's a little rose plant. And here you can see the roots a bit better. It's got a really interesting shape. It has a lot of character. Alright, next up is a tamarind plant. Tamarind. It's similar to a rain tree. So it has delicate, flat, kind of feathery type leaves, which my dad really, really likes. It's from Australia, and one of the interesting things about this tree is that it has a very cool line. The bark is thick and dark, and so my dad really likes that contrast that's made. It's a gorgeous contrast between the strong, dark, powerful trunk and then the light, feathery leaves. This is an older plant. It's at least 12 years old, maybe 15. And during the growing season, there are little clusters of fruit and pods that are used medicinally in homeopathic medicine, but none of those are showing now. So once again, just gonna kind of take you around and show you trunk. Really great shape. You can see again that contrast between the dark bark and the light feathery leaves. It's really beautiful. This now is a willow leaf ficus. There's a few ficus types, but willow leaf ficus, it's a gorgeous tree in a sumo style. So here are its leaves, and then sumo style just means that it has a short, squat trunk and it doesn't grow very tall, combined with a tight canopy of willow leaves. And as you saw, the leaves are long and narrow. For my dad, personally, he likes bonsai trees with smaller leaves. He tries to concentrate on trees with smaller leaves, as with this one. He just likes the look of it better, and so this one has smaller leaves, and we'll also see that the next few do as well. Here, I'm just giving you a little look again at the trunk. You can really appreciate how thick the trunk is compared to the branches and the leaves. Alright, then we have a Fukian tea tree. Fukian tea, this time with an exposed root. So, it's a Fukian tea in an exposed root style, which is called Nebari, Nebari. And as my dad said, if you look carefully, you'll see that it has a kind of Tim Burton-like feel. With exposed roots, it's important for the roots to be shown and for them to be clean. Ideally, you want the roots to be as vertical and straight down as possible. So that's the desired look. And then he wanted to show you that he's got one root going over there and two others crossing. But in general, he's really pleased with it, really pleased with these roots. This was also a tree that was heavily wired to get the bends and twists in the trunk. You can see two types of aluminum wire used here, used to try to shape the branches, and ideally they're going to create a thick cluster of leaves that will cascade over the end of the plant as it grows. The wires are left on to shape the direction and the appearance of the branches. So you apply the wires and then, you remove them when the time comes. He's gonna wait as well, he was saying, and then do something called ramification. So as you get little pods growing, like little bits of new growth, you keep trimming them back so they thicken up, and that should create a nice green canopy in 2 to 3 years. During the dormant season, the wires don't need to be watched closely because the tree is not growing quickly. But during the growing season, when the foliage is exploding and the trunk and branches are just going crazy, the wire can cut into the bark if it's left on too long, which, as he said, can create unsightly grooves that you then have to use paste to cover. We'll see an example of that in a little bit. So here, I'm just giving you a close-up of those gorgeous exposed roots. You can also see the wire better. And then here is my kind of shaky hand trying to show you just how much movement is in this tree. I was recording and turning the tree with my left hand, so it's a little wobbly. Alright, then we have a Premna tree. My dad said this is a really cool tree, or at least I think it's going to be, which made me laugh. This is a popular type of tree. There's a number of styles that you can do with a Premna trunk. This style is called literati, Literati. So you have this long, slender trunk with no branches, and then a final cluster of leaves at the end when you're finished. He bought this this one from a nursery, and when he took it to his teacher suggested they trim the foliage at the top and extend it down. Their goal is to create a duplicate loop and then do a cascading foliage canopy on the other side. In the growing season, the newer growth will get larger and thicker, and they'll keep extending it and wiring it to create a curve that's a kind of variation of what is already there, but on the other side. So here's just a better look at all the funky stuff this little tree has going on. It's really special, as you can see, and I quite like it. Then we have a Premna tree in an exposed root style. So this is a Premna with exposed roots. Here are what the leaves look like, tinier leaves. So these roots are really, really cool, and it's just a great tree. He also is going to show you that he got it in July, and when he got it in July and wired it, it grew so quickly that by the time he got the wires off 12 days later, the wire had cut into the branches. So he had to put some healing paste on it, and that's filling in now. So there you can see the paste. And here is a little close-up, just so you can see some of its shape with my shaky hand. Then we have the Desmodium, a Desmodium, otherwise known as a Vietnamese bluebell. So, as you can see, this tree has some wires on it, some wiring, and it also has classic bonsai soil. It doesn't have big lava stones, but it does have small lava stones, pumice, and some akadama clay. Akadama clay. It has a beautiful trunk, and it had already been worked on by someone with very good bonsai skills when my dad got it, and then it was given to him. It has nice curvature in the trunks. Again, you want some motion. That's what's desirable. And then in the trunk, you can see a lot of wiring for what he calls the first and second branches. First and second branches. And then you want an apical cluster at the top. Apical. Like there. Yeah. In growing season, it has really pretty blue blossoms, hence the name of Vietnamese bluebell. And here's another shaky turning close up for a little extra appreciation. You can see how great the trunk is. Okay, here we have a Chinese elm. It's a Chinese elm tree. It's very fast growing and pretty hardy. This is what its little leaves look like. This is a double-decker arrangement. So what you're trying to do with two pots is keep the primary root ball in the top pot, and then you can put another pot below it to add height without having to repot the plant. Every time you repot one of these plants, it slows down the growth of the tree. Typically, you want to repot them every 2 to 3 years. So, if you want to thicken the trunk and get some good movement and thicken the superior branches, you can add another pot. Each of these pots has holes in it that the root ball can grow down through. And then what he's showing you there is that he can pick it up together like that because the root ball has already grown down through. It's already established, or really established, and extending down to the lower pot. The larger the root ball, the faster the tree is going to grow. and it's got a nice shape, no wiring, and it has small leaves, which he really likes. This then is the Singapore holly. It's got a really interesting shape, of course, and it has very small leaves, which, as you know by now, my dad really, really, really likes. So there are the tiny little leaves. This tree has been chopped and cut here, he's showing you. And if you chop something, what you have to do is establish a new branch to then become the leader and form your apex. There's me trying to steady the leaves, the branches. So the chop is starting to fill in a bit. And yeah, you're just trying to establish a new branch as the leader. It has beautiful white blossoms and small leaves, but the leaves are really sharp and prickly, so it can be difficult to work with. It was wired this past summer, and it had a little bit of grooving from the wires, so he added some paste. But he said it's a nice tree. You know, it has some subtle movement with the slant, and it has interesting roots in the base. Also, the texture of the bark is really important to him. He likes it. And then, you know, we filmed this when it was cold, and it had lost a lot of leaves because of the cooler weather. But when it's really fleshed out, it has a really dramatic look. And he was just saying also you can see the new growth, like where it's lighter green on the ends. That's all new growth, even in the dormant period. I would love to see it more fleshed out, so I'll have to check in on it in the spring and summer. Here's a closer look at where it had been chopped. You can see there. And it's true, the leaves were really prickly. They pricked me. Here we have a tiger bark ficus. Tiger bark. It has a really cool texture to the trunk. And here's what the leaves look like. Not too small. So the texture of the trunk is something my dad really loves because it's got like this kind of grainy texture, and it's thick with some nice bends in it. It also has a lovely canopy. If you remember your math from high school, is what he was saying to me. A lot of the shaping you want for a canopy, a bonsai canopy, should form a scalene triangle. Ideally, it forms a scalene triangle, so 3 sides of different lengths. So long axis across the top, short axis on the right, and then a steep angle on the left in this case. So all the sides slightly different in length. And then he was saying it has like rat tail roots on the surface, which add extra character. These leaves are the biggest leaves he has. He likes small leaves, as you know, but because the trunk and the shape of the canopy are so beautiful, it gets a pass. It's a very lucky tree. So he was willing to bring it on in, and then here we just have a close-up again of those funky little roots. Okay, and then we have a ficus ginseng. Ficus ginseng. So this is his mutt, as he calls it. It was a gift. Here are the leaves. Biggish leaves. Yeah, so it was a gift, and he wanted to add that it was not an expensive gift. This type of tree is known for its convoluted multi-limb trunk. Usually there's 3 or 4 legs to the trunk, you can see here. And this tree was done in a typical nursery, not a bonsai nursery. So he didn't realize that they had grafted the canopy onto the lower trunk, which is why it's kind of gnarly where they meet. Unfortunately, the graft had been established, so he just had to go with it and cut a lot of the growth back. He's establishing a first and a second branch, and then you have the leader. So there's the first and the second, and then the leader going straight up. And let's see, the first and the second, the leader going straight up, and then, yeah, there we go. And then another branch in the back. He wants to add some soil. And yeah, he says ficus trees, all the different types, ginseng, tiger bark, willow leaf, they're all hardier and really good for beginners. Alright, then this is his Fukian D forest. So that means it looks like a forest. This is his first forest. It was done last August. Again, he chose his favorite, the small leaves with small white blossoms and red berries during growing season. And like I said, it's called the forest, which is technically 5 or more small trees to start with. Classically, you're looking for an odd number when you make a forest, but some people do even numbers. It has 7 trunks. He's counting here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 and 7 are 2 small ones in the back on the side. It's best to set a forest out with uneven numbers, and you want the trees to turn to the sides or to the front and back to give it some depth. You don't want just a line of straight trees. So it's doing pretty well. He covered the base with moss, but it's been cold in the winter, so the moss is dormant and kind of suffering right now. Underneath, it's bonsai soil. And he said in the spring, he'll try to bring the moss back, or replace it with more moss, or replace the moss with just straight soil. It's all held on a piece of slate. There's no drainage holes in the slate, so he placed 2 tiny copper pipes front to back with a slight tilt, so it drains out the back when you water it. He also drilled some small holes in the rock to help anchor the trees into the soil. Each tree has its own root ball. In 2 to 3 years, the whole thing will be one giant root ball, and you'll be able to pick it up off the rock if you want to. And then the thing about the rock is that it's a little messy and it discolors whatever it's on, and it's also really heavy to move. So because of that, he'll probably move it into a nice bonsai pot in 2 to 3 years and continue to grow and shape it. You can also add trees later if you want to fill it in. But I personally think it's just a really cool project. All of these trees are cool, and because this one took so much construction, I think it's extra cool. And then, I don't know if you can see, but he also added a figurine to this tableau. So he said, "These are my boys, Sam and Fred, who are just having a talk in the forest. It's very peaceful for them." So I got a little close-up of them here, Sam and Fred. Alright, that concludes this tour of my dad's bonsai garden. It's something that gives him a lot of joy, and he was really happy to share it with me, and then with me, or through me, with you. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'll talk to you very soon.